Hi everyone. Welcome back to the Canyon Kids Upper Grades Bible Study. We're going to have a wonderful lesson today. You might be thinking, well, what are these signs all about? Well, these signs represent choices that we make. Sometimes in life we make bad choices, sometimes we make good choices. Sometimes we're selfish. We think about ourselves and we make bad choices sometimes. What would be an example of that? Well, maybe your mom says, yeah, you can go out and play and you can ride your bike, but don't ride your bike in the street. Well, you want to. You're kind of selfish thinking and you think, it's okay, I think I'll be fine. And you might make a bad choice. But you might think, I love my mom. I trust her. And I know that she only wants what's best for me. So I'm going to think about that love and trust that I have for her, and I'm going to make a good choice. It happens to all of us, doesn't it? Let's imagine that this is your life. Well, if your life is filled with selfishness and you're thinking about your own personal desires, you might end up making bad choices. But let's imagine that your life, which I know it is, it's filled with the love of God. It's filled with trust in God. Your heart is full of love and trust that God will take care of you, He will bless you, and that His instructions to you are good and worthy of being followed. Well, when God tells you to do something, the selfish side might say, I want to make a bad choice. But if you think about how much you trust God and how you know that He loves you, then your heart will make good choices, won't it? Selfish choices? Choices made because you love and you trust God. Well, we're going to talk today about Abram, who did love and trust God. And we're going to see what happens. Now today, you need your lesson sheet the most because I have written out for you the passages that we're going to be talking about on your lesson sheet. So it's lesson 4. The title is God's Covenant or Agreement with Abram. And it looks like this. So follow along with me. Use your finger. Keep track. Start at the beginning. The Bible says that God spoke to Abram in a vision, like a dream kind of thing. And He said, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your reward. Why do you think He started with do not be afraid? Well, we didn't study Genesis 14 last week. But Genesis 14 tells us about something that was pretty scary in Abram's life. It would have been very easy for him to have been afraid. You see, something bad happened. Remember how Lot went to live in the city of Sodom? Well, there was a big battle. 5 kings from all around came to battle against the other kings, the lesser, weaker kings. And they won the battle. So they captured everybody from Sodom. The king, the people, including Lot, his wife, his daughters, and his belongings. Well, word came to Abram, and Abram decided to take action because he loved Lot. So he took his 318 servants, gave them weapons, trained them in warfare, and went out to fight. And sure enough, they rescued Lot. They brought him back and all his belongings. So Abram had done something that was pretty scary, hadn't he? But God said, look, don't be afraid. I will be your shield. Remember, He had promised, I will take care of you against the other nations. Well, Abram says to him in verse 3, Abram said, God, I don't have any children. You promised me children, but you haven't given me any. So will my servant Eliezer inherit all the things that you have promised to me? God says in verse 4, "No, Abram, you will have your own son from your own flesh and blood." And then he tells him again, "Go out and look at the stars. You can't even count them, can you? Well, that's how big your family's going to be." He reminds him. And then he says, "And I promise that you will have the land of Canaan. I brought you here, and I'm going to give it to your family." Wow. In fact, God had made him 3 promises, right? And he said, your family will be great. You'll have your land. And from that family and from that land, someone will come to bless the whole world. But Abram says, "How can I know that your promises will really come true? Can you give me a sign, please?" A sign? Can you show me something that will prove that it's going to happen? Look at God's answer. He said, "I will make a covenant, an agreement with you." Here's what I want you to do, Abram. He says, "I want you to bring me a cow," or it might say a heifer, which just means a young cow. "And I want you to bring me a goat. And I want you to bring me a ram and 2 birds, a dove and a pigeon." And he says to Abram, "I want you to take these animals and I want you to sacrifice them. I want you to kill them." And so Abram does that. And not only that, he obeys God and sacrifices them, but then God wants him to cut them in half. "I'm going to tear them." This will be a little less bloody. So he says, "I want you to lay them 1 piece over here and 1 piece over here. And take that ram and cut it in half and lay 1 piece over here and 1 piece over here." And he said, "Take the goat and sacrifice the goat and lay it 1 piece on this side and 1 piece on this side." Now, I didn't tell him to divide the birds, but he laid them on each side as well, so that there was a path in between. Abram did this, and then all day long, he had to fight off the vultures and the wild birds that wanted to come and eat the carcasses of these animals. So all day long, he was fighting off the wild birds. You think, what in the world is going on here? Well, it's confusing to us. We've never done anything like this. But in ancient times, people did this. When they wanted to make an agreement, maybe it was a very powerful king and a lesser king, and they wanted to make an agreement. "I will protect you if you will fight for me." Well, nowadays, when we make an agreement, we just sign a piece of paper. We write it down and then we sign our name. Sign a piece of paper. Yes, I'll do that. That's not what they did. They would slaughter these animals, divide them in half, and leave a pathway in between. It's called cutting a covenant. They would cut the animals to make a covenant. And that most powerful king, stronger king, would walk between the animals on that bloody path, as if to say, "I will keep my part of this covenant, and if I don't, then let happen to me what has happened to these animals." Then the lesser king would do the same. He would walk between the path, as if making a promise, "If I don't keep my part of this covenant, then let this be done to me." Well, Abram did what God said. He sacrificed these animals, and he left a path for the cutting of the covenant. But then a miracle happened. God came down and walked the path. I mean, God came down with hands and feet and walked the path? No. But God came down in the form of a smoking pot and also a flaming torch. Now, do you remember other times when God showed himself as a flame? I know if you've studied the Old Testament, then you'll remember that he's going to do that for Moses in the burning bush. He's going to appear in the burning bush as a flame. And later, when he leads the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, he's going to lead them in the form of a cloud of smoke. Abram realized that this was God coming down to cut the covenant. And God, in this form, passed through that bloody path, as if to say, I will keep the covenant, even if it means that I will bleed and die like these animals. Come to think of it, that did happen, didn't it? Jesus, the Son of God, did become a sacrifice to keep the covenant of forgiving us and blessing us. Wow. You know, the interesting thing was, God didn't ask Abram to make that walk. Abram didn't walk through the bloody path because God was showing him, I will keep the covenant. You can't do anything about it, Abram, but no matter what, I will keep the covenant. I will make sure that it happens, and you can trust. You can believe me. Wow. Well, what was the response? Look on page 2. Abram and Sarah grew very old. They still didn't have children, but they continued to trust God because they knew he will keep this covenant. And in Genesis 15 and verse 6, look at the red letters. Abram believed the Lord, and God credited it to him as righteousness. See, Abram couldn't do anything to make it happen, but he believed that God could and that God would. And so when God looked down at Abraham, he called him righteous. Abram, he's a righteous man. He's a good man. And look what else. In James in the New Testament, verse 23, it says, Abram was called a friend of God. Wow. Now, Abram didn't do anything to cut this covenant. God did, because Abram couldn't make it happen. But God is all powerful, and God could make it happen. You know what? I can't always understand God's commands to me, and I can't see him. He's never even come down for me in the form of, a smoking pot or a flaming torch. I've never seen God, but I have learned about him. I've looked out at the world and seen the great things that he made. I've looked up at those stars in the sky, and I know that he put them there just like Abram did. So, even though I can't see God, I trust that he will keep his promises to me. He will bless me. Now, you know what? I could make all the good choices in my life. I could always make good choices and oops, good was on this side, huh? I could always make good choices. But it's not gonna accomplish anything. It's not gonna make me go to heaven. Because I can't do that. And also because I'm not perfect. And there are gonna be times when I'm gonna make bad choices anyway. But you know what? if I love God with all my heart, if I trust him as the one who can take me to heaven, then it makes me want to love and trust him even more. It makes me want to make good choices because I want to be God's friend too, just like Abram. Now, here's your challenge. You probably have a good friend. Do you trust him or her? Do you enjoy him or her? What do you like to do with them? Tell me about it. Maybe send me a picture. Maybe write me a story about something that you guys did together. Because friendship is based on trust and love. So I'd love to learn about it. Have a great week this week, you guys. I love you.